Hey,
We're live. Hello, Dave. How are you?
hello, Martin. I'm all right. I'm enjoying my day off. Not
Mm,
doing a great deal, much really. I had to go to Asda earlier. That was fun.
very. Yeah.
Mm,
You may have seen on social media. I did the same, and unfortunately, our local Asda is not good. I had to
no.
complain to their manager.
Oh dear.
Apologies to anybody who works for that store, but I had to tell off 3 separate Asda members of staff who were clearly on their way home getting their own shopping, who were ignoring the arrows, ignoring the marking, and then when I challenged them on it, went, "Oh, but I work here, so it's okay."
Yeah. See, speaking as an Asda colleague, yeah, no, you've got to do as you preach. You know what I mean? Like I've actually been quarantined for 6 weeks, as you well know.
Yeah.
But having gone back, it's like, wow, guys, you do know, as much as the members of the public may not be treating us like real people, we have to act like we're real people. We have to obey the social distancing because if we don't, how on earth are we meant to reinforce it?
Well, that's it. I mean, that's it. And yeah, it's one of those. I think it's difficult for everybody, and we're still trying to work out what what's right, what's wrong, how we can fix things, how we can do things, how we can get by. And I say this is after like what 7 weeks, almost 8 weeks of this now.
I
So
think it's nearly 9, actually.
23rd of March was when we started technically, wasn't it? So work,
Yeah.
working back from that, whenever somebody watches this, it will be irrelevant what day it is today, I suppose. But
In the middle of a pandemic,
yes, in the middle of the pandemic.
Martin and Dave are grumpy. But, you know, to
but we
anyone
have
who
found
knows
out.
us,
But we
go
found
on.
ourselves with some free time, so we've decided that we're actually going to get together and do some podcasting. So
Why
that's a
not?
that's a plus side.
It's we're grumpy, but we're productive.
Yes. Just a slight shame that we're not able to, have other people on board. Hopefully, we'll encourage some more of our colleagues into these podcasts as we build up steam.
Yeah, no, I think in fairness, if we given the situation where we are so woefully isolated from each other, we might actually be able to get people who may not be in our immediate area quite as much. So
That would
we
be
have
lovely too.
many friends around the country who may be willing to help. Or hey, we may have international friends who may want to join in. Lord knows.
Exactly. I
No,
mean,
that was
it's
not a plug at a certain individual who would kill me if I dared.
no idea what you could be talking about. No idea there.
Mm,
I mean, for those who don't know and who might be listening and might stumble across this video on the YouTube channel or on any of our sort of the places we put our podcasts, we have done podcasts before. Dave and I know each other through university. We both attended John Moore's. We both studied creative writing, and there was a group that formed, shall we say,
mm.
around a particular thing, around a particular subject, and we are very much we sort of all formed around our love of, I suppose, speculative fiction, sci-fi, fantasy,
Yeah,
genre fiction, I suppose.
and then
Um,
the other assorted geeky stuff that tends
exactly.
to go with people who write speculative fiction.
Yes.
'Cause I don't know about you, but it's been very rare that I've found somebody who writes speculative fiction who is not also like a nerd.
Mm.
What they're a nerd about can differ, but it's normally somewhere in the grand scheme of like Star Wars, Star Trek, comic books.
Well, you say that. I mean, I don't know whether it was on one of the tested podcasts, but it was certainly on one podcast where they were talking about how everybody's a nerd over something.
Hmm.
Like, if you are somebody who enjoys knitting and spends all of your free time knitting, you are most likely a knitting nerd. You will know what needles to use, what wool to use. I'm not a knitter, so I've just realized this analogy is going to break down really quickly. But if you are, if you're a football fan, you are likely a football. There is a good chance that you will be a football nerd, or you will,
Yeah.
there are nerds of various different things. All it is loving something
Mm.
and loving it enough that you want to know a lot about it. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of thing. Nerds aren't just all about the geeky, the sci-fi, the fancy. They're
No,
just
it's true.
So
And
yeah.
to be fair, as we move on to a I personally think it's the internet's doing if it's done this to us. But as we get more into, I'll make my point. As we as a society and a culture go on and on and on, get further into certain things becoming more mainstream, like the Marvel movies, I think is an excellent example.
Yeah.
It becomes less of a like being a nerd, so to speak, becomes less of a thing because I mean, my cousin is arguably a massive football. I say arguably, he is a massive football fan. He's a big Manchester United fan. He always has been.
Yeah.
He also loves The Hobbit, and always has done. He will quite happily talk to me for hours about Star Wars. He will quite happily, but at the same time, he'll also talk to me about how Ole Gunnar Solskjaer took over Manchester United for a bit, and I'm aware that this is probably gone entirely over your head.
No,
but it means
I
something to me.
recognise the name Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. When I was growing up, Manchester United were kind of a big thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. He played for Man U at some point.
He did.
There we go.
He was my favourite football player, to be precise.
In fact, if I remember rightly, I actually used to watch a lot of Man U matches when. I could probably name a good chunk of that team, or at least one of their team, because you had both Nevilles, you had Ryan Giggs, you had, I think you probably still had Peter Schmeichel at the time.
Yes, probably.
I want to say Paul Scholes. But the point is, I'm not oblivious about sport.
I know, I'm just needling you for fun.
Yes. Well, it would be a bit like if I started talking about the Six Nations rugby, let's be honest.
No, I know the teams. I, in fact, enjoy rugby. I watch the Six Nations, to be quite frank. I just don't know who the players are because their names aren't on the shirts. That is what, actually, when I first watched rugby, that is what first threw me off. Why aren't their names on the shirt? Why not? And then I realised, because it doesn't matter in this game, really.
No, there's a really big guy about to take down another really big guy. It's going to hurt one of them. Who's it going to hurt?
Probably both. Who's going to walk away with less pain?
Yeah.
But anyway, we're meant to be a writing channel. We're talking about sports.
Yes. This is a fair point. But
I think it's the headsets. We look like those people who are in commentators' boxes.
Yes. Well, quite possibly. But I mean, one of the things. Well, okay. So we decided we were going to talk writery things, and one of the things we wanted to talk about as writers was. Or one of the things I suggested as this is our sort of our trial, our test, our first time back, I suggested to you that we talk about how writing has affected, or how this sort of COVID-19 pandemic has affected us writing and what we do and like I know there are things now I'm looking at my writing and going, I can learn a few things from this. Like, I mean, if you're it's a great time to be writing zombie fiction or like outbreak fiction or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because as a writer, all of the research here, all those people who say, "Oh, well, zombie fiction, zombie couldn't happen and it couldn't take over because look at what people would do." If people can't follow the arrows that are on the bloody floor of a supermarket, how the hell would they pay attention to the advice if there ever was, in this sci-fi world or this fancy world of zombie outbreak?
Indeed.
Let's be honest, half the country would be zombies before we got the chance to put the arrows on the damn floor.
I mean, if you look at some of the stuff that we get in our media, it could be argued that half of the population already is a zombie. Oh. I went there. I will not go there. But no, I'll watch the telly, and that's all I do. No, that's mean. That's mean. Telly's fine. It's fine.
I suppose the same could be said though about those of us who might sit in front of a computer and game for a few hours a day.
I disagree. We interact with something.
Well, I mean, I must say, I've said that. I've said kind of the same. It's like. I remember with my little brother, and there's like 21 years age difference between me and my little brother. While as he's been growing up, of course, gaming is the thing that more kids do than they do watch TV now, or they'll watch a gamer on YouTube or Twitch or whatever. And one of the things I've said is the difference between watching something and playing a game is that one is active and one is passive. And there is that distinct difference, I guess. So I agree with you is what I'm saying. I'm being long-winded, aren't I?
I mean, hi, I have met you.
Fair point.
Also, I can ramble for the best of them, so I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit as well.
Quite probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I like the sound of my own voice. In fact, I despise the sound of my own voice. It's just I've got a lot to say.
Try being an actor who frequently has to cut together, videos or audio clips of them doing something, and then has to decide which the best are. I cringe on almost a daily basis. Yeah. Like, if it's somebody else, I can go, yeah, clearly that's great, that's good, this is good, that's fine. When it comes to myself, it's like, oh no, I really should reshoot that because that one's not great. Like, I did a 13-second snippet for a video recently, and I ended up doing something like 30 takes because I wasn't satisfied with any of them.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that because one of the things I tried to do in my writerly time, while I was in fact, sorry, bear with me.
Yeah.
I've been reminded of something that I had to do during that. When I was first isolated, because I was isolated for 6 weeks, I thought, oh well, this would be a perfect time to join AuthorTube or try and make some, a video diary. I did a few videos, as I'm sure you may have seen, mostly where I was just being snarky to amuse myself, which is, something I want to do. But anyway, no, and I found that just listening to my own voice was so frustrating that I went, nah, sod that.
Yeah.
And every time I would record, I did about 30 minutes of like just me answering a questionnaire, Martin. And my phone would go off so much that I just realized, oh wait, I've got to put that on silent. And then even with my phone on silent, the computer, which is also linked to that, would just ping off.
Yep.
And obviously, as the person who would be messaging me, I have to reply because otherwise they may just keep messaging me.
Yep.
And it goes on and on and on and on. If my mother were to text me and I don't reply, likely is she's going to ring me. So
it's
I'd have
not
to
easy,
start
is
all
it?
over again. It's just. So I've just put my phone on silent now, and I warn ahead of time, like, don't message me during this time and this time. I'm busy. What are you doing that's making you busy? You'll find out. Just leave me alone.
At some point, you'll find out.
I'll get to it. Don't worry. No. But no. So I've had, as I say, rightly things we can do during the COVID-19 pandemic, because Lord knows we can't go outside all that much.
So what have you been doing?
Well, I, as would be no surprise to you, have been writing fan fiction.
Amazing.
I know, it's a shock, but no. Basically, I had an idea for a story that I'd always sort of go, oh, I'll get to that, and I never did because things. And then I suddenly found myself with free time, and I thought, well, I may as well. I had an idea. May as well. I think I'd written the first half or the first chapter of the idea. And I just kind of went with it. Why not? I won't bore you with details because I probably would just lose you, because it's not even Harry Potter this time, Martin. It's something else entirely.
Oh, I will say, right.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, I am not the biggest fan of Harry Potter, and I attribute this to the first real big fantasy thing I read was Lord of the Rings, and then I read Robin Hobb, and I read Phil Pullman, and I read some of the classic fantasy before I got round to Harry Potter. So when I got round to Harry Potter, it seemed to me a bit younger than my age range. That's probably the best. That's the best way of putting it. So, I'm not the biggest fan, but I have been working on a piece of writing. I've been working on the script for a video essay, not for me, but for somebody else. So I've been part of their script writing team. So I've had to read all of them, and I've had to watch the movies, and I've had to read all of the extended stuff, and I've had to watch the Fantastic Beasts stuff, and I had to make the mistake of going into the whole Pottermore thing, and yeah. So if your fanfic had been on Harry Potter, I might have understood.
Oh wow, what a shame. Oh well, never mind. You actually might know more than I do at the moment, because I took one look at Pottermore and I only ever I went, I can find out more by going on the Harry Potter Wikia.
So I know we've talked about this before, right?
Yes.
In a previous podcast.
Yes.
As a writing thing,
Mm.
or from a writing standpoint, one of the questions or one of the criticisms you could level at the Harry Potter movies is, what the hell is the magic system and how the hell does it work?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really not explained. And
Not in the
arguably,
movie.
it's not really... It is slightly explained in the books, but it isn't very well explained. Like, J.K. Rowling does some really good stuff with mythology and pulling off, you know, she does stand on the shoulders of giants, and I don't think she could ever dispute that. But nevertheless, what she seems to do with Pottermore and what she seems to do on her Twitter is basically go, I've suddenly realized that there are all these holes in my book that loads of these really, really nerdy people have picked up on. I've got to plug them, and I've got to plug the gaps. So there's things like, in the early days, going back to some of the early posts, there's like, this is the sort of image you would have to draw with your wand in order to cast that spell. So it doesn't really matter if they say the words as long as they do this movement.
Yeah.
And it's... Yeah. It's a writer going back over their work and going, I forgot to do these things. Now I'm trying to retroactively fix them.
I think what it is it's not so much a writer trying to retroactively fix things, because it's more a writer trying to make everybody happy. Because I think, to be fair to J.K. Rowling, it's not a story about magic.
No.
It's a story about a number of things. But
friendship first and foremost, developmental stuff. I mean, let's be honest. The developmental aspect of it, the bit of we're going through school, and I mean, how many times? You know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a great example of this. You know, again, it's not a coincidence that they both happened at the same kind of time, and they're both setting up monsters and evil and magic and various other things as the big bad, because you're going through school. School is hard for kids, like it or not. And so to see that fight, what feels like a fight, mirrored, and to see people vanquishing those demons, it's not difficult to see why they became popular and why they became a touchstone socially.
There's also that's my thing, though. It's very much more about growing up. It's very much a coming of age story. I would also argue that it's definitely not high fantasy. That is for certain not what it is. I watched a very, very, very good series of videos that talks about tropes called Overly Sarcastic Productions, and if you can find a link for them, do, because they're brilliant. They cover myths, and there's two friends, and they do like myths and legends. One of them does trope talk, which is brilliant. It's all about. We did one about urban fantasy recently, which I jumped on. It's the first time I actually watched it, and I disagreed. But anyway, she Red, as I believe we will refer to her as, does talk about Harry Potter and the urban fantasy thing. And actually, this is something I hadn't thought of before. I think she's right. I think Harry Potter's an urban fantasy because it deals with a secret world. It's set in a city. Granted, the main setting of the story is up in a castle in Scotland, but nowhere.
The location of the school is incidental, though, so
it could be,
that's not really a factor.
Yeah, it could be a school in the middle of flipping London. It's just behind a secret veil.
Yeah.
The fact that it's in Scotland is just thematic. But there's many magical places which are inside normal human surroundings. I think she's got a very good point.
Order of the Phoenix and the house there, Diagon Alley and
Grimmauld Place, even the Ministry of Magic, their head of government. I think it's like meant to be in a department store or something. It's in the middle of the city. It's quite clever. So she's got a good point. But as I say, though, to get back to the ramble,
yes,
the story's not about magic itself. It's got magic in it. But I will agree with you that it did need some fleshing out. But she was a new writer. She was just trying to tell a story. The fact that it has plot holes and it has bits where it's going, well, it doesn't really make sense. While fair critique, she could have turned around and gone, yeah, does it really matter though now? Because let's be honest with you, Martin. None of the things that you can really pick at Harry Potter on technique are breaking for the enjoyment of most people. Like you and I might be a bit like, it's a bit clumsy, but we're trained writers. For general public, yeah, it's a bit naff, but I can get through it.
Well, it's like it's no different than Mad Max, for example.
Hmm.
So the original Mad Max movies, if you look at them as a piece of writing, there's very little character development. I mean, in the first movie, Max doesn't get mad until what, like the second half of the freaking movie. Most of it is this kind of, I mean, it's not a technically well-made movie. And yet somehow it made so many millions that they went, oh, suddenly we've made so much money. We have a franchise on our hands. What do we do now? So like, and again, like, I don't know whether you were given this as an example when you were studying creative writing, because we were in different year groups, weren't we?
We were. I was technically 2 years ahead of you.
Yes. And yeah. Sorry, my mind was casually editing out an age joke there.
Behave.
Well, let's be honest, I come off worse in that exchange.
That's why I said behave. I'm great just like that.
Anyway, during our year group, we got given a section of 50 Shades of Grey as an example of particularly bad writing. And let's make no bones about it. It's not well written. By any means. It is disastrously written. And but what is interesting is, so a colleague of mine, when I was doing a commission for a script recently, they put out a video essay, and it was really interesting actually. They were looking at writing techniques, and they were saying the sad thing is this kind of, so I mean 50 Shades of Grey is essentially another it's Mills and Boon for a modern generation. Realistically, it is. It's that same kind of book, and they laid out this really well constructed video essay. But at the very end, they said the problem is Mills and Boon just isn't popular anymore. And although it's better written than 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades of Grey is just people like it. So what I'm saying is irrelevant. And there is that thing of, even if I don't like something, or even if something isn't terribly well written, as writers, we kind of have to realize that what's popular isn't always well written. George Lucas is a great example of this.
Well, you want an even better example, something that is massively popular, and I will stand on this hill, but is actually a detriment to British writing. And I wish it would go away, but it never will. EastEnders, Emmerdale and Coronation Street, and Hollyoaks, soap operas. Go away, get off my television.
No, I
don't anymore.
I disagree. I would disagree with that. Let's be honest. So if we're talking writing, Shakespeare was the soap writer of his day.
Oh, definitely.
Charles Dickens, and even Oscar Wilde. Now, I would argue that Oscar Wilde technically is a superb writer. If you want to write plays, you have to at some point study Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
He is very, very good at that. The thing with Oscar Wilde, the thing is, though, they all used realistic characters in their work. They used characters that would be familiar to people. No, not even in inverted commas.
I'm saying that for soaps.
The thing is, what unites all three of those writers, Shakespeare, Dickens, and Wilde, in my opinion as a writer, is character.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, this was the course of my my undergraduate dissertation, was that character is the thing. We have now broken apart Shakespeare into so many little different pieces. We have analysed it and analysed it and analysed it. And the one thing that is constantly written off is, well, character isn't really that important. No, the characters are king in understanding Shakespeare, Dickens, and Wilde. Because it's the characters that draw you in. In the same way, Jane Austen, the Brontes, they all used characters. The development of the novel hinged on these characters, these people you get invested in. You develop an emotional attachment to those people's lives, and the same is true of Harry Potter. So when we consider soaps, you need to consider the attachment to the character. You are invested, or the audience is invested and cares about the character. And that's what keeps people coming back week after week after week after week. Now, yes, the writing technically isn't great, but the development of the characters
Well, I mean, yes and no, though, Martin, because I grew up in a household where I can tell you. Here's the thing: I do not recognise Shane Ritchie as Shane Ritchie. I recognise him as Alfie Moon,
Okay.
if I've got the name right there.
I,
The
I
fellow who
wouldn't know.
played, I mean the actual actor, because I think
Yeah,
the
yeah.
actual actor is very funny. I like him, but and like the Slater family and all that. I know these people's names. I can remember them. I can envision them in my mind's eye.
Hmm.
But it doesn't matter because if I went and watched it today, the entire characterization of all of them would be flipped and meaningless. It's not just badly written; it's shock writing. And as much as yes, people in like Shakespeare stuff is for the lowest common denominator, English, the lowest common denominator. I mean, one of the best stage direction I've ever seen comes from Shakespeare. Man leaves pursued by bear. But
Excellent. Pursued by bear. Yeah.
yeah, it's brilliant. But I would argue that every single Shakespeare play is entertaining. I have not been entertained by a soap ever.
Okay. So, in the same way, though, I don't find myself entertained by football. Actually, that's not true. That isn't strictly true. I like watching small, low league football matches because there is something at stake. There is genuinely, and like in our neck of the woods, Tranmere Rovers. When you watch a Tranmere Rovers match, and more importantly, when you watch the fans of Tranmere Rovers, there is something about those kind of matches. Now, if I go to a Liverpool, and I have been to a Liverpool match since being up this neck of the woods, there isn't the same.
No.
It's this kind of, there's something about it that seems so false and so, I just don't like it.
Yeah.
And yet, the level of investment people feel in it. And I know this seems like a weird tangent, but you have to remember that you have somebody like, Brecht, Bertolt Brecht wrote quite extensively on how you can consider football or sport as theatrical and theatre performances.
Yeah.
Now, the Americans do this really well. I mean, the Super Bowl, for example, is a theatrical event more than it is a sport. Let's be honest. It's not.
Yeah, it's an event, not a game.
Yeah, you want to see athletes doing their best in that kind of game, you watch rugby. You want to watch the entertainment and the jazz and the pizzazz and the veneer and the entertainment, you watch American football.
Yeah.
That would be how I would interpret it. That's how I understand
it. That's fair.
And so when you look at it through that lens as well, you can what anybody says, what critique you might put into it is irrelevant because people still enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I do think it's that emotional investment, that emotional connection that we're looking for. And part of me, as a writer, would love to be able to unpack what it is about really crappily written stuff or, really corporate, fake, veneered football like the Premiership. I would love to be able to unpack what it is about that makes it so successful. Because if we could do that, then actually you could apply that same technique to better written things and maybe they would become more successful. Maybe that's the fevered dream of an idealist writer, but
or a despot in the making. Yeah, I got you. But no, I know
I may not have been playing Stellaris recently, and I may or may not have been setting it up as a dictatorship. Yes, or playing Jurassic World and just letting all the T-Rexes and Indominus Rex sort of loose on the park. It's quite fun.
I mean, in fairness, those sort of games have the ability for you just to wreck shop.
Yeah, pretty much.
They want you to. They want you to.
Yes.
So if you don't do it at least once or twice, why are you even playing?
Well, I mean, in fairness, I played it really well, and you end up with this superiority complex of, well, all those people on movies, they were crap. And I mean, in fairness, actually, it is worth saying that, and we're going to touch on at some point in a future podcast about sort of gaming and world, so I'll save it till then. But it has given me some ideas on that episode that we're going to do. So we'll I'll save those for them. But as I say, soaps. I think you can defend soaps. You can defend stuff that isn't technically well written. I think if you look at it through the lens of that connection, that emotional connection people have.
No, in fairness, I'm very aware that I am, while not in the minority of hating them, I am probably in the I can't speak, honestly. I am very aware that I am in the minority of wanting them to disappear entirely because they are popular. I mean, there is a reason why, despite the fact that I don't recognize any of the people on the flipping front of the TV mags anymore, that it is always the soap stars' faces who are on the TV magazines. It is always, if you get like that, That's Okay or What's on TV, it's always insert pouty individual who's having a problem with another ugly looking man who has a head shaped like a potato. I mean, nothing against people who've got a head shaped like potatoes, but I mean, that's all I really see. That's what I remember from EastEnders. Phil Mitchell looking like he's been plucked from a field. But anyway, no. But yeah, no, it is very interesting though, because I do love going back to Shakespeare though, because I love this one. I love this point. This is a brilliant point. People treat Shakespeare like it's high art. It's not. it's lowest common denominator. It had to attract people over from the bear pits.
But I will defend the artistic integrity of Shakespeare on the fact that the reason Shakespeare is art is because he was, like it or not, a trailblazer.
Oh yeah.
You're dealing, when you're talking about Shakespeare, with somebody who, and it was Peter Brook who he wrote this really interesting essay that he gave as a lecture in Germany called Evoking Shakespeare. And one of the things he says is it's irrelevant who Shakespeare was as a person. His great achievement was that he managed to create hundreds of different characters.
Yeah. That we still know well. Now.
Yeah, and they're still familiar touchstones. You know, the idea of that layabout young son who has finished university and is doing nothing much with their life. Well, that's kind of still in existence. That's Hamlet. You know, Hamlet is a layabout in a castle somewhere. I mean, it doesn't matter that it's a castle, it's a home somewhere, and not doing very much with his life.
Wasn't he doing an English degree? I'm not taking shots at people who did English degrees, but I have a memory of someone pithily going, he's basically an English major about halfway through his degree, lazing around on his mum's sofa.
Yeah, but
it's a very apt description.
Yeah. And that touchstone is integral to the way we understand a lot of literature. It's almost as integral to the archetypes of pantomime, for example, and Commedia dell'arte. I mean, Commedia dell'arte is a bit more. It's very much more stereotypical.
Yeah.
And it actually holds less of a sort of esteem, in my opinion, than sort of Shakespeare's ability. But you know, Commedia dell'arte is the foundation for a whole load of sort of character types.
Yeah. Well, what I mean by saying, you know, I don't mean to say that Shakespeare isn't art, because of course it is. It's brilliant. And I love Shakespeare. I actually actively do love Shakespeare. It's brilliant. But I get quite miffed, I think is probably the right level, with people who go on like it should only belong in, you know, like prestige theatres and only the best actors should do it and it's all about the class, darling. It's like, no. It is art. It doesn't mean it has to be elitist.
No.
You're not better than other actors because you're doing Shakespeare. You're just doing Shakespeare instead.
And but I mean, again, you say this, and if you come back to the audience, when I used to work front of house at a theatre, one of the questions we would always get, and there was one particular lady who I could recognize and identify every single time. So instead of her asking another usher, I would go over and I would tell her the answer to her question. The question commonly was, am I going to enjoy this version? Now, the reason they asked it was because they wanted to see it not how it's done today, So today we shy away by and large from the sort of heavily costumed, heavily propped, the more traditional sort of costumes in favor of something more modern, in favor of something a bit different. Unfortunately, there is that element of our audience, or the element of a theatrical audience, who want to see it that way. It's the big mistake Emma Rice, I think, made. You know, the Globe Theatre, if you want to go somewhere and watch Shakespeare done in that kind of oldie-worldy costume, in that oldie-worldy way, you went to the Globe. And then Emma Rice came in, and I will make no bones about this, Emma Rice is a stunning director. She is absolutely fantastic, and everything I have seen of hers has been magnificent. She was, however, the wrong person for the job of artistic director at the Globe, because she brought in lighting. She brought in more modern sound effects. She brought in a way of doing things that was not why people went to the Globe Theatre. And there was all kinds of aspersions cast about her character, you know, and some people saying that, you know, her being let go from the Globe was about, you know, it was about sexism, or it was about this or about that. No, it was a lack of understanding of the bottom line, why people went to that theatre.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. That's the real key. Understanding your audience. The majority of people actually liked seeing Shakespeare done in the way that the theatre I worked for was presenting it.
Yeah.
But there is always going to be that section of the audience that expect it to be done in the same way that the Globe does it.
Yeah, no, I get that. And the thing is, I wouldn't have any issue with that. Like, again, I have no great issue with how it is presented. It is more of a matter of how people will approach it. I think in part it's because we had to study it in school.
Yeah.
And obviously, you present Shakespeare to children, you are going to have to choose particular plays. You're going to have to water down Someone in the Mountains calling for you.
No, I was looking behind the blue screen for a particular book, because there is a quote that is very relevant here. That
there are no books for that. There's a mountain. I don't know where you're pulling the books from. You knew I was going to riff on it. You knew.
Yes.
If for no other reason than I can't.
will be in a library next time.
Do it. Anyway.
Well, yeah. What I was going to say was I was going to input that there is a writer called Liam Semler who wrote a book called Teaching Shakespeare and Marlowe. And what you're saying is kind of what he said in a beautiful way. And he basically said learning for the student sometimes is struggling uphill through a hail of, I'm paraphrasing here, but through a hail of crap. And it's true. We make learning these things so ridiculously difficult. That could probably be an entire podcast in itself of learning and learning writing, and I think we do need to do that at some point.
Yeah,
it would be interesting to have either Helen or Sean on that, because
we'd lose the contest.
Helen is working on her PhD, from what I understand, and Sean did his master's in creative writing, which it would be interesting to get their input.
It would be. No, but with learning Shakespeare, though, I didn't enjoy learning Shakespeare until I got to I got to sixth form, and I was studying Antony and Cleopatra. Brilliant play. I love that play. And the reason I think is I'd read Shakespeare independently. I didn't like Romeo and Juliet, and not just because, you know, I feel it's overblown. I really do. I think it's been. There are many things in Romeo and Juliet. I could do an entire video on why I don't like Romeo and Juliet, and I could do it on my own, with detailed facts and not just I don't like it. No, I can break it down. Not because it's a bad play, what it's been turned into. But anyway, the reason I loved learning about Shakespeare, though, I got the right teacher. Mr. Hewson was amazing, and to get him for sixth form, so when you're more or less, you know, in the eyes of the law, an adult soon, they treat you with a little bit more respect's the wrong word, maturity, I think, because I cannot imagine being taught Antony and Cleopatra in year 7. but I mean, not to the same way. But I think it's very important how we read it and how we learn it. I mean, I only ever learnt about Macbeth. I learnt about Macbeth twice in school. Hamlet. I studied Hamlet in sixth form with Mr. Hewson. Thank God for that. One of my favourite plays. And Romeo and Juliet in school. They are not my favourite plays. One of my favourite plays from Shakespeare is Hamlet because it's brilliant. But the other ones I read myself, and to read them as a reader and not have to dissect it. I think where we're taught Shakespeare in school robs you of all joy of it unless you have the right teacher.
And that's where, so when I did my MRes in English, this is one of the things that I encountered. And I don't have particularly good memories of that degree, or specifically some of the teaching on that degree. And trying to make people who've worked in a university setting understand that actually a lot of what they do when it comes to teaching that kind of thing is not what needs to be done. There is a growing consensus. There are people doing things in odd ways, but I was coming at it from the best way of teaching literacy to children is theatre or is drama as a subject. And the reason for this is that when you are, one of the big challenges you have with teaching kids English is getting them to read.
Oh yeah.
And we're not just talking novels here. We're talking getting them to read anything, because everything they read, every website, every back of a cereal packet, everything they read is something they've read, and that's a good thing. That can only be a good thing. But if you're doing drama, you out of necessity have to read a lot of scripts. You have to learn lines. When you're reading those scripts, you're encountering punctuation. You're encountering punctuation and you're encountering grammar in a way that people actually use it, because it's largely dialogue. So you develop a more visceral understanding of how language is used, how grammar is used, how punctuation is used. You know, when you see that comma there and you're told by your drama teacher, well, hang on, you need to take a breath there because that comma means to take a pause. You are having to then vocalize that. You're getting that physicalized understanding of what that comma means. That comma means take a short pause. So not only are you reading more, but you're encountering it in a very, very different way. And there's a lot of research on this. I could do ages on just how much research is out there about this. Teaching literature, in my opinion, and this was the thrust of my, I attempted to make it the thrust of my MRes dissertation, and I fear I failed somewhat in that. I mean, I came out with a fairly decent mark, but if I had the time now, I would write something so much better. But the thrust of what I would argue is that actually literature and even language is best taught in a more dramatic way. You know, we don't want to start ripping it apart. I mean, because this was my experience. What you encountered studying Shakespeare was what I encountered during my MRes. Was so in literary theory, they still talk about psychoanalytic theory. They still talk about psychoanalytic criticism. Now, as somebody who studied psychology, and I studied psychology at A-level, and I studied it through the Open University and a few other places, psychoanalysis was comprehensively debunked in the 90s, like comprehensively. There is, and it is in a book called Psychology for A-level, Michael Einzuk and Kyra Flanagan, because it's down there to my left, they talk about an international studies, 15 different studies across 13 different countries, and in all of those thousands of participants, only 2 people could it be said that psychoanalytic theory could apply to, which basically means Freud is comprehensively debunked. If you're talking about psychoanalysis, it's pointless because it doesn't apply to human psychology. That's not how humans work.
Yeah, it's been disproven.
Yes. So if you are then, if I have, as I did, a university lecturer telling me that I need to consider psychoanalytic theory or psychoanalytic criticism for a book that was published before psychoanalysis was even mooted as a theory, I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
You're pulling apart a book in which there is no grounding for that to happen. But of course, it's become so established in the set of tools that literary theorists use to understand books that you kind of have to show that at least you know and understand that psychoanalytic theory is used in order to show that you know your subject. The problem is I have a fierce reaction against that, and I really wish I could introduce a whole load of psychologists to a whole load of literary theorists and just say, can you psychologists please explain to these people why they shouldn't be using this theory to understand texts? Or at least, I would say, theory or text written before Freud. Because, of course, text written after Freud, people are aware of psychoanalytic theory, therefore they're going to put it into their books. That makes sense. Text before Freud, I would argue maybe there's less of a grounding for that.
That's fair.
Tangent, but what I'm getting at is that's an example of how I was forced to analyze a text in a way that made me completely disengage from what I was doing. And if I can do that as somebody who's studying a master's, of course, kids who are studying to the same kind of levels, unfortunately, they are looking at feminist theory. They are looking at a whole load of other theories. They're not necessarily given as much information at secondary school, but they are looking at those theories. Of course, they're going to disengage.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I mean, the advantage of, I think at least plays being studied in English should be done through drama, because that's the medium they're meant to be done in. If I, for example, if I were, say, in my English class, told you have to read Shakespeare, you have to read Romeo and Juliet, which, okay. I think one of the best tricks my English teacher, because she was a very good English teacher, to be fair to her, it's not her fault that the way she had to teach Shakespeare ruined it for me, because she was good at everything else she taught me. She had us reading from bits of it, and those are the bits I remember more. But when I just had to read this play, I did find myself going, "Good Lord, I wish we could just get in groups and perform this scene, because then I'd have a better feel for it." Now that's just how I learn. I learn by doing. Kinetic learning, I think it is. But I really do think, and my cousin, who is a drama teacher, would probably back me up on this one, that you get a better sense for the text and its meaning, and even the subtext, if you are in fact doing it, because that's how it's meant to be given to its audience. I had a lot more ease getting my head around, say, Robert Browning's poems or war poetry or anything else in literary fiction that was already in its meant to be medium than I did with Shakespeare. And I think, I genuinely, going back to my teacher, Mr. Hewson, I think the only reason why I know Hamlet, and I love Hamlet so much, is because the man was a walking actor. He'd walk around he would have, your attention was like this. If he went anywhere in the room, you were following Mr. Hewson, and not entirely because of what he was saying, but because of what he might be doing. Because he had this tendency to walk around with a metal pole with a rubber ball on the end of it, so he didn't break anything, and he'd bang hit the table next to you. But it was then involved.
The same though can be true of novels and other forms of literature though. So what I did for my master's was Jane Eyre and dramatic. So an adaptation of Jane Eyre, and this is actually where I sort of more explored and pushed towards with my dissertation, was the adaptation side of things. For those who are dyslexic, for those who are put off by huge walls of text, and let's be honest, those people are out there.
Oh yeah.
The drama and theatrical adaptations, or film adaptations, or any kind of visual adaptations at least, offer that ability to encounter the text in that same way. If you're in the front row of a theatre watching an adaptation of, say, Jane Eyre, and smoke comes gently, or mist comes gently over the stage and comes rolling over the bottom, and it comes into the audience, and you've got a darkened surrounding around you. You can see, a crow maybe is projected and flying around the steeple of the church as they're walking through a graveyard. You have maybe some music in the background or some ambient sound in the background. You're getting just as much information because, Bronte in a particular scene, and I wish I could remember the chapter, but Masters is done and I've forgotten it.
Yeah.
As they're going through a churchyard, through a church graveyard, these kind of things are all described. You get that same information visually. That's not to say it's a replacement for reading the book. And I think as a writer, I would be really disappointed if somebody didn't want to read my book after having seen the film. But that is a useful way of encountering texts. And for some people, it's a preferable way.
Well, I mean, it comes back to that old truism that the book is always better than the movie. It's always different, but I must admit I've come across a few movies which I have much preferred that delivery of the same story than I would through reading the book. I mean, I've read Dracula, and Dracula is better read than it is watched because you get the feel of Dracula, what he was aiming for, a lot more. But if you want to just watch, if you just want to enjoy something, it's much better to watch a movie about Dracula, especially with Gary Oldman in it, than it is to read the book, because the book is very isolating and it brings you in and you're reading it through excerpts. It gives a different feeling. I don't think it's as enjoyable. It's a different kind of enjoyable, but I also think it's a bit less enjoyable because it makes you feel so afraid for this poor man. I don't think I've ever worried for a member of a fictional universe outside of more not ancient but older literacy than I have for Jonathan Harker and Dr. Jekyll.
I mean,
two men and those books that I have read. Oh, good Lord, the fear. However, one of my favorite interpretations of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, for example, comes from the god-awful League of Extraordinary Gentlemen film.
Fine. I thought you were gonna go with that stupid thing that was on a TV channel. I think it was just called Jekyll or something
with James Nesbitt.
Yeah, that was.
I watched that.
Oh, that was painful.
Yeah, I enjoyed it at the time. I enjoyed it at the time for what it was, but when I actually read Jekyll and Hyde again as an adult, I went, oh.
But then, but you say this, Sherlock.
Sherlock, I would love to get a couple of our friends in on this one.
oh, clearly, and I'm sure if we had the likes of Mayor or Sam involved in this discussion, it would be a rather heated debate. But let's make no bones about it. Sherlock is not a good adaptation of the Sherlock Holmes books. And in fact, my big issue with it is Sherlock Holmes, the book, or the books written featuring Sherlock Holmes as a character, they give you enough information that if you understand deductive reasoning, you can come to the same conclusions as Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Conan Doyle was very smart in that, and he was able to give you that level of information.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Sherlock may as well be a frickin' magician in the TV show. What they did was they did not give the audience enough information, so they portrayed genius as magic.
Yes,
that's how I interpret it.
No, I get that, and I do agree, because there are sometimes going, how the devil did you get that? Like, there are so many examples, but there are a few things where you're just like, nah. But when it's written, you can see it more. You can see the reason, the argument. Like, one of my favorite, clearly inspired by Sherlock Holmes and also Hercule Poirot characters is from I can't remember the actual name of the character. I think it's Ford or something, Mr. Ford or something, from Knives Out.
Oh, yes,
Daniel Craig's character. If you watch that film back and it's brilliant. you can see where he starts making his you can see where he starts realizing what's going on. They show you it's there, it's just not front and center. It's a little bit off to the side. If you're paying attention, you can see.
Yeah.
Which is all he's doing. And I think that's a much better adaptation of any Sherlock-esque character than Sherlock. Sherlock, as the TV show, it's very enjoyable, but it's because it's all spectacle and very little substance.
That's it. Yeah. It's well, I mean, there is substance
on the deductive
there.
reasoning side.
There is substance there in the way they handle certain characters. Now, there are certain characters that are handled really badly and are an absolute nightmare. But if we start talking about that, we'll go on forever. But
And we'll get yelled at.
I'm not worried about being yelled at, but in all honesty, it's one of those. It isn't just, again, the characters, I think, are what create that connection for people.
Yeah.
And it's where it almost doesn't matter how well written something is. I don't particularly find certain things well written.
No.
Doesn't mean I'm not going to enjoy them.
True.
I tried last night to watch, because I've not seen some of the early episodes of Monty Python's Flying Circus, and I love Monty Python.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on Netflix, and I made the mistake of watching the very first episode, and it's difficult to watch because it's so slow. And I ended up finding myself thinking, how did anybody ever get past the first half an hour?
Well, on that point, because this is something I've stumbled across with some older stuff, when you go back to watch something that you loved and it's like when they've polished it and made it brilliant, you've got to go by what it was going against at the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There were fewer TV channels, so they had less competition. So if you wanted to sit there and watch TV, you were going to sit there and watch the whole thing.
Yeah. Also, they were very trend-setting in their style of comedy. And also, you know all about their... No. Think about other comedy from the Python's time. I don't know any. Let's start there. But so if they were not trend-setting, they were at least the best, because I don't remember anything else. Most long-lasting, shall we say, rather than best. But anyway, I've lost my point now because I was defending myself. Anyway, no, it's gone. Sorry.
No worries. I mean, it's worth saying that the two Ronnies were sort of around the same time.
I've remembered my point. Thank you.
60s, 70s.
Yeah, around the same time.
Very late 60s. But
see, this thing for me, it's like, when did the Ronnies start? Because they're brilliant and they're much, much funnier, much more regularly, in my experience.
I want to say it was 1970, 1971, somewhere like that. It was. It ran through the majority of the 70s.
But I have remembered my point, because it comes back to my experience with Blackadder. You're not just watching them having made it like, oh no, we've fine-tuned it now, we know what we're doing now. There's also, you've seen imitators, you've seen people influenced by them who've then gone on to improve. So to you and I say, that's a bit naff, why was that funny? Yeah, but we've then seen their successors and the people who've taken their ideas and indeed improved upon them for our modern sensibilities and our modern sense of humour. But to go back to the experience I had with it, was watching the first season of Blackadder. I have not watched all of the first season of Blackadder because I got to episode 2 and I was like, nah.
Yeah. I mean, the first season of Blackadder is really difficult to watch, but in fairness, there is a long and storied history, and there is a very long and storied history about why season 2 was set mainly in 1 or 2 rooms, and that is how they got it made.
Yeah.
It got better after then, but yeah, it's one of those things.
It is always worth just considering context that a thing has been put into, because people are calling out for like a remake of the Harry Potter films, and not many people, thankfully, but they are there. I'm just like, no, yes, let's do that though. But there's a lot of, it's just very, very, very weird, because some of it, people want to remake a lot of the stuff, and I am aware that I'm rambling a little bit on this topic, but The argument is that it would be better now because we know the whole story. No, it wouldn't, because you'd still have to make a different medium.
Yeah, I mean, I think remakes is an adaptation certainly is something we could talk about for quite a while. I think it's one of those where, yeah, I actually, you know what? Let's put that on the slate. Let's say at some point we're going to talk about adaptation. I think that's a good thing to do. What I am going to say though is I don't know that I intended for it, or that we intended to go on for this long. So
No,
maybe what we should say, yeah. So maybe what we should say is today we have discussed how it doesn't matter how good a writer is, because crap writing is going to be popular, and let's not bother with any kind of summary. Let's just go.
Taste is subjective.
Yes. Well, I tell you what. Let's call it an end for today.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're going to be back, and we're going to do a few other things here and there. For anybody who has been, thank you very much for watching. It's been. Hopefully these will come back a bit more on a regular basis, and we'll get some of the other faces who came along with us to drop in. Do you want to add anything?
Nah.
We need a way of ending. We didn't think about this. We need a way of ending.
We didn't. All right. Okay. Let's think of a way of ending. I'm Dave, and I'm very tired.